I am a guard in a hidden prison located in the Arctic. Something is horrifying about the inmates. Part 3. As time went on, I saw humanity behind the violent demeanor of many inmates. A common fear of correctional officers is susceptibility to manipulation by the incarcerated. I tried not to become a victim of my empathy. One of the prisoners named Aluko managed to escape. I collected information on how he did it. Rumors abounded that he had turned a toothbrush into a pick. He allegedly weakened the concrete around his barred window. Another tale given was how he overpowered one of the correctional officers. The officer was too embarrassed to admit it, so they tried to cover it up. Aluko was a massive man. There was no shame in losing an unarmed combat match with him. The lack of weapons used left me baffled. The strangest part of the story was not how he escaped. It became obvious the inmates had some sort of intelligence. They were not as impulsive as we judged them to be. They had the basic want of freedom, or the cruel entities that controlled them did. The most unsettling part of Aluko's fleeing was not how he managed to scale the barbed wire. Nor was it his willingness to traverse the tundra. What perplexed me the most was how his life ended when he was less than half a mile away from the prison. It was not the elements that took him. Something had torn him apart. The theory of it having been a polar bear spread. They wanted a meal to go with their Coke, one of the officers joked in the briefing room. I did not find the lame quip funny, and neither did the warden. Our general lack of civility was not uncommon, but some jokes were intolerable. While many of us wrote it off as a polar bear attack, there was one aspect of the butchery not in alignment with that. Aluko's eyes are missing from his skull, a member of the search team said. Something carved an upside-down cross into his chest. Or what's left of it. Medics came back and told us everything they had seen. The brass took over the investigation shortly afterward. I asked one of the priests what could have ended his life. What kind of wraith-like being could perform such a precise and terrifying mutilation, I asked. This has the makings of an attack by Azazel, the priest said. That particular type of demon wanders the wilderness. It can take many forms. Be on the lookout for anything resembling a goat. If you see horns when you are doing an outside perimeter check, be sure to recite a prayer and use this. He handed me a crucifix. My stubborn agnosticism did not want to accept it as a believable weapon. I relented because he was so polite. Buckley called us into his office. When we got there, he did not slam the door as I expected him to. Sio Nwosu and I gazed at each other with alarm as Buckley waved at us to follow him. He took us to an elevator in one of the back chambers that I had earlier dismissed as a room for the cleaning crew. An elevator was there. He opened it, had us step inside, and led us down to the basement. The subterranean cellar was completely barren, except for two items. One was a stained glass window that depicted the Virgin Mary coated in ice. The second was an electric chair. I did not know the prison had such a chamber. Everything about the seat looked old. It seemed to belong to a medieval era, rather than having come from decades ago. The arms of the chair had the faces of gargoyles at the ends of them. I've been talking to officers about this, he said. As a team, everyone is culpable except for me. The procedures we maintain of checking on the subjects every hour are important. It wasn't written as a flexible guideline. It exists for a reason. For an inmate to manage a successful escape attempt does not look good on us or to the higher-ups in Rome. I don't know if you are lazy or scared to do your jobs, but either way, you need to toughen up and develop a work ethic. Otherwise, it's going to get ugly fast. I had the policy changed. Regardless of how understaffed we may be, you are now going to do 6 routine checks on the inmates every hour. If I hear a single complaint coming from your lips, you will regret it beyond measure. Are we clear? After a silence ensued, Buckley called us incompetent once more and dismissed us. Nwosu took the elevator up. I turned around and spoke to Buckley. Warden, I have a question. I did not permit you to ask one. I suppose after the beatdown I gave you, I'll allow it out of pity. Do any of the inmates have the demons driven out of them? And if so, where do they go afterward? Do they go back to the prison they came from? Are they granted immunity and allowed to go home? Do the exorcisms make them more pure than what they were before? You are nothing more than pond scum with a badge, Buckley said with a sneer. Don't ask questions if your wage doesn't merit it. How many times do I have to tell you? I was only wondering because I have not seen Anna in a while. Watch what you say and get out of my face. You are a hairbreadth away from me documenting your insubordination. Although I loved pushing his buttons, I did not want the negative consequences. I left the room. I did not yearn to be the newest execution there. I went up into one of the towers. I looked out at the expensive plains of frost and woodland. Buckley's threats and bullying were starting to get to me more than usual. Verbal abuse in my industry was not uncommon. Something about his irate tone under these conditions made it sting much worse. It filled me with a certain anger that I did not know how to resolve. I figured getting some fresh air and doing a bit of investigating would help me stay preoccupied. I needed to clear my mind. Aluko's escape gave a negative impression of my work performance. I still refused to believe his death was some sort of natural phenomenon. I brought a sniper rifle with me. I looked through the scope. The bullets had a cross carved into each of them. I tried to trace the exact path Aluko took when he made his final attempt at getting back into society. I carried a night vision device to help me see through the darkness. A half hour later I saw movement. It was subtle at first. Snow fell from tree branches. My heart raced as I saw a figure wandering through a thick cluster of pines. It was a woman in a nightgown as white as the hills around her. Backward arching horns protruded from her forehead. The way she moved was peculiar. Her steps did not seem to telegraph any sort of movement, as though she was floating. There were no indentations in the snow behind her. Her head tilted to the side. The last frozen feeling she wore on her face was one of pain. She seemed to suffer a sort of paralytic neck injury. A black-tailed deer was only 20 feet from her. She sneaked behind it, predatory. What I saw next disturbed me. The deer's torso opened. A crimson spurt littered the snow with puddles of red fluid. The ethereal woman reached down and tried to grab some of the eviscerated body parts. Her hands sunk through the chunks of meat. She wailed at that moment. I squeezed the trigger. It connected. Her chest tore, 2 sheets splitting apart. Her scream became even more voluminous. She exploded like an effigy, incandescent in the Arctic. She evaporated into ashes. The flames went away and so did the spirit. A pile of blackened and smoldering embers got carried away by the wind. They decorated the trees as though it was a macabre Christmas stage setup. The next night, I visited Nwosu in his room. His place was a mess. He was usually clean and organized. His few paperback books, sci-fi military adventures, were strewn about on the floor. I noticed he also had half a bottle of scotch on his nightstand, which was a definite violation. We were not allowed to drink. The threat of an emergency forced us to maintain sobriety. Still, I was not going to snitch on him. I think I killed a demon, I said, as I took a seat across from him. I searched high and low for the body and couldn't find it. One of the preachers told me it was a particular type of evil called Azazel. I looked at Nwosu and saw that his eyes seemed to stare out for 1,000 yards toward the ceiling. "What's wrong, man?" I asked. "I found the death ledger," he said. "I don't understand. Whoever flipped the switch on the electric chair we saw yesterday kept a logbook. Everybody whose life he ended. There have been exactly 106 people killed in that chair. Sure, some of them were repugnant before their possession. Others got locked up for a seatbelt violation. There's no consistency in regards to why they were worthy of capital punishment." Nwosu pulled out a manila volume. He tossed it my way. I flipped through it and saw many names. Some struck me as familiar. Did you have any suspicion they were killing people under our noses? No, I said. I searched the papers for dates, to see how recent or old the incidents of annihilation were. All were within the last year. There was a weird energy in the electric chair room, Mosu said. What you banished out in the woods may have been the spirit of an already possessed yet dead person. It's possible that when they're killed, their demonic selves stay on this plane. They could choose to haunt us. Could be every ghost story written since the beginning of time is the darker half of a human lingering. I must admit, I don't know who would want to stay in a place like this though. I nodded. I also began to wonder if it was correct, or if he was losing his sanity. I helped Aluko escape, Mosu said as he turned to face me. The conditions of this place appall me. I want to assist many more.